Diamond D Sports presents from the National Hot Rod Association Championship Drag Racing, the 21st annual running of the Winston World Finals. Speeds in excess of 260 miles an hour, elapsed times in less than 6 seconds. Championship Drag Racing from the NHRA.
Well, it sure seems ironic. The youngest racing the oldest one more time.
He calls me the wolf because he knows how hungry I am. He's been my hero forever, but I sure want this win.
Odds are sure getting in his favor.
That old man has beaten me 3 times this year. I got to get him at least once.
I got one thing on my side. The car has been running good.
I think the car is right, but geez, Scarlett's car is always there.
Big Daddy, just hang in there. Don't make any mistakes, because the wolf is after you.
Easy now. Don't blow it. One mistake, and it'll be too late. He'll be gone.
Lord, make it a nice, safe run. Don't let anybody get hurt. Let the best car win.
This is the Los Angeles County Fairgrounds in Pomona, California, and this is the 21st Annual Winston World Finals. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans, and we're presenting this World Finals plus a special event within an event. The first ever Krager Weld Wheel Top Fuel Classic, bringing together 8 of the best top fuel dragsters from throughout the United States. All season long, these racers have been qualifying to earn the right to compete in this single event today. 8 cars going for $30,000 in top prizes. Being introduced to the overflow crowd are our 8 competitors. They have worked long and hard for this moment. The cars, a work of art. They would grace any car show, but today they are the quickest and fastest accelerating motor vehicles in the world. The top fuel dragsters of NHRA Championship Drag Racing. Here are your competitors. The number 1 qualifier, the reigning world champion, Joe Amato. The number 2 qualifier, Don Garlitz, the man that has already locked himself in to that Winston World title for this season. Gary Ormsby, the number 3 qualifier, and rounding out the top half of the field, longtime veteran Connie Coletta. In the number 5 qualifying spot in the Krager Top Fuel Weld Wheel Classic is Darrell Gwynn, the youngster, such a rising star. Another veteran in the number 6 spot is Bill Mullins. You can see how close they are by the points they earn throughout the season. The veteran Gary Beck in the number 7 spot, and making the field in the number 8 position, Dick LaHaye. There you have the competitors for the Krager Top Fuel Classic. Krager and Weld Wheel combining to post the qualifying cash throughout the season, plus the awards that will be going today, with $30,000 to the winner of this Top Fuel Classic. Our 8 qualified cars are set to go, and here is the first pair. It is Connie Coletta in the near lane. In the far lane will be Dick LaHaye, both drivers hailing from the state of Michigan. Coletta, sponsored by his own Coletta Flying Services entry, while Dick LaHaye, along with his daughter Kim, campaign as a totally independent team. There is no big sponsor dollars riding behind Dick LaHaye, but he is one of the most successful top fuel racers this season. Coming in the number 8 qualifying spot, racing against the number 4 qualifier. By virtue of his qualifying position, Coletta has lane choice. As the cars creep forward, they're getting into the staging beams, and the starter will throw the switch at his discretion. It's a green light start, and both cars leave the starting line at the same time, but Coletta stretching ahead at the finish. It is Coletta by over a car length. Elapsed time for Coletta, 5.58 seconds, 256 miles an hour as he defeats handily Dick LaHaye. Let's take a look again and see just how it happened. It was a fairly equal start coming off the starting line, but by the time they reached the finish line, 1,320 feet away, Coletta had stretched his lead to over a car length and takes that all-important first round win. He's now in the semifinals. Our next pair of cars, 2 Garys, Gary Ormsby and Gary Beck. Beck, driving the Miller American Special, owned by Larry Miner, now lives in Hemet, California. He is a former Winston World Champion. He is a former U.S. Nationals Champion. Gary Ormsby has his share of national event victories out of Roseville, California, and is highly regarded and is considered one of the cars to beat in this Krager Weld Wheel Classic. Ormsby in the near lane, Beck in the far lane. All the work completed by the crews. It's up to the drivers at this point. Their concentration is totally on their starting line technique, trying to get the advantage off the starting line over their competitor. And it is a great start. Look at Beck. He just launches right ahead, but here comes Ormsby. It's going to be a close race, but the start by Gary Beck pays off at the finish line. His elapsed time actually slower than Ormsby. But you can see Beck's car, that Miller American Special, just squirt off the starting line. He instantly pulls to about a half a car length advantage and continues to maintain it through the quarter mile. His elapsed time was 5.58 seconds. Ormsby, 5.57 seconds. Our next pair, this is Joe Amato from Old Forge, Pennsylvania. Amato will be racing the veteran Bill Mullins, driving for John Kerry. Amato is the reigning Winston World Champion. He won it all one season ago, but comes in second place this year behind Don Garlits. For Bill Mullins, he's got one of the fastest cars in all of drag racing, this John Kerry entry. Kerry, one of the premier diesel mechanics in the world today, decided to go top fuel racing, and he has constructed an awesome ride for his driver, Bill Mullins. For Joe Amato, he also is one of those exclusive few that have run over 264 miles an hour in the TRW Hurst Keystone Special. Amato is also the class of this Krager Weld Wheel Classic field. He came in the #1 qualifier and would love to win it. Bill Mullen, though, trying to stop him here in the first round. Amato, with the lane choice, has taken the lane nearest the camera. Into the staging beams and a green light start. It is Amato easily outdistancing Bill Mullins. And Amato's time, 5.57 seconds at 255 miles an hour. One of the quicker elapsed times of qualifying and eliminations here at this Winston World Finals. You can see it was right from the starting line that Joe Amato took home this first round victory. Just a puff of tire smoke off of Bill Mullins' tires, and that's all Joe Amato needed. Here is the matchup that everyone has been waiting for. The grand old man of Top Fuel Racing, the man that has already won the Top Fuel World Championship this season, against the Wolf. Don Garlits against Darrell Gwynn. Two DGs, both hailing from the state of Florida. One 53 years old, that's Don Garlits. Driving the Super Shops In-N-Out Burger Special from Ocala, Florida, Garlits and Malone teaming up to battle the Gwynn family. From Miami, Florida, 23-year-old Darrell Gwynn against 53-year-old Don Garlits. The legend against the rising star. 3 times this season they have met in competition in NHRA championship drag racing events, and 3 times Don Garlits has come out the victor. Darrell Gwynn wants this race. Well, now he's got his chance. Garlits, the #2 qualifier in the Krager Weld Wheel Classic in the near lane. A great start for both drivers. But Garlits begins to pull ahead. Some engine problems for Darrell Gwynn, and Garlits wins it at 266 miles an hour. Low ET thus far of the Krager Weld Wheel Classic at 5.48 seconds. As we look again, you see both drivers just locked together as they leave that starting line. A few hundred feet out, they're side by side. But at the finish line, it's problems for Darrell Gwynn. Garlits wins going away. That sets up our semifinals for the Krager Weld Wheel Classic. Joe Amato against Gary Beck, with Amato having lane choice. Don Garlits versus Connie Coletta, with Garlits having lane choice. We'll be coming back to more action in the Krager Weld Wheel Classic and also the Winston World Finals in a few moments. But this race, the Winston World Finals, has traveled from various racetracks around the country since its inception back in 1965 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Just in a little flashback, let me tell you what happened back in 1965. Maynard Rupp won Top Fuel Eliminator. His speed was 200 miles an hour. His elapsed time, 7.82 seconds. There was a class called Top Gas Eliminator in those days. Jim Minnick was the winner. He went 8:27 at 178 miles an hour. And nowadays, they're doing that with carbureted and automatic transmission Econorails. Here we go in the Krager Top Fuel Classic. This is Joe Amato, the reigning world champion. He will be racing Gary Beck. Both drivers only 1/100th of a second apart in their first round wins, are considered to be two of the best in the country. Beck has had a long dry spell, though. It was since mid-season a year ago that Gary Beck won an NHRA Top Fuel title. For Joe Amato, last season, the crowning glory of a long career in the sport of championship drag racing, advancing through the sportsman categories to Top Fuel. In his third season of full-time Top Fuel racing, Joe Amato won the Winston World Champion title. Gary Beck, driving that Miller American car of Larry Minor, finished number 2 in the world last season. So on the starting line here in this Krager Weld Wheel Classic, the two best cars in Top Fuel racing a year ago. Amato showing the form that won him the Winston World Champion title, streaks ahead of a tire-smoking Gary Beck, and Joe Amato very consistent, 5.50 seconds, 258 miles an hour. And if you ever wonder what tire smoke and tire slippage does, just watch what happens to Gary Beck. They both leave at the same time when that green light comes on, but there the tires are spinning on Gary Beck's car, and Joe Amato just forges ahead and takes the win to propel him into the finals of the Krager Weld Wheel Classic. He is one win away from $30,000. But that win will not come easily, because either one of our next two competitors will be a tough man to beat. Two of the longtime veterans of Top Fuel racing, Connie Coletta in the far lane, and this man, Big Daddy Don Garlits, the man that has already won the Winston World Champion title for 1985. In his march to that championship, Garlits set an all-time NHRA record of winning 6 national events in one season, now standing at the top of the record book in that category. Garlits and Coletta, those two names go back to the very start of Top Fuel racing. If you look in the record books, their matchups in the early and mid-60s were legendary, and here they are today, both drivers at the top of their game in 1985. Garlits, a picture of concentration. He will be in the near lane. In the far lane is Coletta, and Coletta up in smoke, losing traction right off the start, and it is Garlits all the way through to the finish line with a 5.46 seconds, the low elapsed time of our Krager Weld Wheel eliminations. His speed over 264 miles an hour. You see the tire smoke. Second car in a row in that lane. Gary Beck did it just a few moments ago. Now Coletta, as the lane nearest the camera, appears to be providing the traction, and that sets up the final for Don Garlits with lane choice over Joe Amato for $30,000 in the Krager Weld Wheel Top Fuel Classic. Our look back into the history of the Winston World Finals takes us back to 1969, and this is Dallas International Motor Speedway, one of the finest racing facilities ever constructed anywhere in the United States. This was the home of the Winston World Finals in 1969 and 1970. A huge turnout of cars and spectators. The spectators thrilling to the exploits of Steve Carboni, winner of Top Fuel at 6.71 seconds. Speeds now upwards of 207 miles an hour plus. But the real story came in Super Eliminator. The world champion that year was a man from Miami, Florida, driving a roadster powered by a Chevrolet. His name was Jerry Gwynn. Jerry Gwynn is the father of the Wolf, Darrell Gwynn, who is one of the rising stars in the sport of Top Fuel racing. That was back in 1969. A look back at the Winston World Championship. On the starting line, the finals of the Krager Weld Wheel Classic. In the near lane is Big Daddy Don Garlits. He is the man that has won the 1985 Winston World Champion title. He is racing the current title holder from Old Forge, Pennsylvania in the TRW Keystone Hearst Special. That is Joe Amato in the far lane. Amato has got to contend with the fact that the last two cars down that lane have smoked the tires, but not Amato. Look at him. He's got a half a car length lead over Garlits, and it is Joe Amato with the upset win. And the Krager Weld Wheel Classic going to Joe Amato, 5.51 seconds at 255 miles an hour. Jerry Amato, Joe's wife, congratulating the crew and anybody else nearby as a tremendous victory for Joe Amato over the man that has dominated Top Fuel racing, Big Daddy Don Garlits. Let's go back and look and see just how it happened. Off the starting line, both drivers appear to leave the line side by side. In fact, it's almost identical reaction times. But Amato's car pulls ahead by about a half a car length, and Joe continues to hold on. Even though some engine problems set in, 1/2 car length, that's all the difference. The margin of victory for the man in the red fire suit and the red helmet. Joe Amato coming over to shake the hand of Don Garlits after a tremendous drag race. $30,000 richer. Joe Amato, the winner of the Krager Weld Wheel Classic. All of this action has also been part of qualifying for the Winston World Finals, and the qualifying for the past few days has been absolutely frantic. This Pomona quarter mile has seen some tremendous runs, but one of the most awesome was the effort by Diamond Dave Miller in the far lane. Let's watch. A huge engine explosion, a ball of fire, the parts flying everywhere, and Dave Miller has got his hands full. The engine continues to burn as the parachute deploys, and Miller trying to bring the car to a stop. As we see from a different angle, tremendous the impact and the force of that explosion. The parts flying through the air, the fire burning out of the engine as Miller hard on the brakes, keeping the car very straight, the parachute beginning to deploy, but Miller an expensive effort on his part in qualifying. Let's go to Steve.
Davey, you okay?
I'm fine.
So you scattered everybody down here. There were parts and pieces going everywhere.
Well, my lens came off and I couldn't see, so I was trying to get everything down there together, get my glasses back on and get the brake and the parachute. It was
We had to be concerned with stopping the car. This is not the longest racetrack in drag racing.
oh yeah, once I could see again,
You get no advance warning of that kind of a disaster coming.
not really.
All right, he's okay and very disappointed, and also probably back financially about $8,000 in an explosion like this.
A tough break for Dave Miller, but he was not the only man to experience problems here at this Winston World Finals. His came in qualifying, but this man, Don Garlits, had his in the first round of eliminations today. He was racing Dick LaHaye. It's Garlits in the near lane, LaHaye in the far lane. It was a good start for both cars, some tire smoke off LaHaye's car. It appeared to be an easy run for Garlits, but then all of a sudden, oil started coming out. Flames licked out from beneath the car. Garlits got the car stopped. He was uninjured. The car was basically undamaged, except for those engine problems.
That motor that was hurt in round number 1 is in the trailer now, and it's headed for nowhere but the recycler. Your next soda pop can may have a blend of Don Garlits' racing engine in it. Right now, Big Daddy and crew have successfully completed an engine swap, and his concern right now is not to that destroyed $7,000 block or $1,500 crankshaft. Right now, all he's thinking about is horsepower. Make all you can with this spare engine. And of course, his difficulties may cause a little shift in the momentum towards that young man who's been trying to beat his hero all year long.
Steve has been trying throughout the season, but has yet to do it. Darrell Gwynn could meet Don Garlits, come up later in eliminations, but in the first round of competition at the Winston World Finals, it was the former NFL pro quarterback Dan Pastorini, now out of Memphis, Tennessee, and his quarterback sneak up against Darrell Gwynn from Miami, Florida. Pastorini was in the far lane, his crew chief Bobby Rowe checking things over, getting him lined up just right. Pastorini completing his first full season on the NHRA Championship trail and doing a very creditable job qualifying here in this extremely tough field in the Winston World Finals. Pastorini with a slight advantage off the starting line, but Darrell Gwynn quickly recovered from his tire smoke and moved on to take the win with a 5.68 second elapsed time. Gwynn now advanced into round number 2, where we pick up the action with Darrell Gwynn will be in the near lane against one of the longtime veterans. This will be Gene Snow from Fort Worth, Texas. Snow, a former campaigner in Funny Car Eliminator, moved into Top Fuel a few years ago after sitting out the sport for several years, forming an oil company that was most successful. Darrell Gwynn has made it into the final round twice this season, once at the Summer Nationals, again at the U.S. Nationals, but both times he lost to Don Garlits. Gwynn here in round number 2 at the Winston World Finals is facing another veteran. Gene Snow in Top Fuel Eliminator has been rapidly improving. He won his first national title way back in the mid-1960s. He won again this season in Top Fuel and would love to take home this Top Fuel title at the Winston World Finals. Snow getting the final instruction from his crew chief. Both cars into the staging beams, and it's Snow out in front. Another tire-smoking run for Darrell Gwynn. This time he does not recover. And the elapsed time for Gene Snow, a 5.49 second time at over 260 miles an hour. The best time ever for Gene Snow. As we look in slow motion, you see Snow pulling ahead at the start. The tire smoke from Darrell Gwynn's car indicating he is losing traction, and in this case, it lost Darrell Gwynn the race.
Well, Darrell, just when it looked like it might be your day, it all goes up in smoke.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to swallow, I'll tell you. I've never won one of these races in Top Fuel, but I figured we never qualified number 1 either, and we qualified number 1 here, and I figured, well, this is the one we're going to win. This is our last chance of the year. I can't bow my head to anybody. We've done very well this year. I got to give credit to everybody that's been a part of this car. We're going to sew up the season. We're hoping to stay in the top 5, depending on what Ormsby does. So all in all, we had a good year.
Back at the starting line, our next pair of cars just about ready to go. The Jolly Rancher Special of Frank Bradley from Napa, California. He has won several national events, including one right here on this racetrack. For Bill Mullins, he's also won in Top Fuel Eliminator and in Alcohol Dragster at the wheel of Carey's Diesel. Mullins has got to be coming into this round riding a natural high as a result of his efforts in round number 1. Earlier, he defeated Joe Amato, the big winner in the Krager Weld Wheel Classic. Amato was in the near lane, Mullins in the far lane. Amato had a slight hole shot, an advantage off the starting line, but look at the thundering Carey's Diesel pull ahead at the finish and take the win over Joe Amato. Now it's Frank Bradley staging first. Then comes Bill Mullins. And Mullins' luck runs out this round. He was late off the starting line. Bradley puts together a beautiful 5.63 second elapsed time at 249 miles an hour. And the Jolly Rancher Candy Special advances into the semifinals. Here is Don Garlits in the near lane in the Super Shops In-N-Out Hamburger Special against Gary Ormsby, a Toyota dealer from Roseville, California. Ormsby using some semi-aerodynamic devices on his car. You can see the little spoilers right in front of the rear tires trying to break up the air as they hit those big flat slicks as it goes down the racetrack at over 260 miles an hour. Number 4 in the world last season was Gary Ormsby. Don Garlits, number 1 this season, and will carry that big number 1 all next year. Staging ever so carefully come both cars. The Christmas tree goes green, and Ormsby with a hole shot. Garlits has got problems. His car slows, and it is Ormsby across the finish line first. And one of the big upsets of this meet, 5.49 seconds, 259 miles an hour. Once again, an instant replay. We watch Gary Ormsby. Garlits actually left the starting line first, but Ormsby's car responded so well, he pulled ahead in the middle of the racetrack and did not lose that lead to the finish line.
Well, your crew did a fabulous job of getting the engine replaced along with yourself, and seldom really can you come back from those engine explosions. It seems to get you behind and you never catch up again.
It's a tough deal sometimes. You know, you want to set it richer and where to be safe, but you just can't. We had the fastest guy in the round.
Have you ever enjoyed a season any more than you did this one?
No, this has really been a good one, Steve. Really been great.
Don Garlits looking back on a season that has carried him to the top of the record book, 6 wins in 1 season, an all-time record for that man. Gary Beck against Connie Coletta. Coletta from Ypsilanti, Michigan. He won his first race back in 1967 on this racetrack at the Winter Nationals. Gary Beck has won many NHRA national event crowns, including the U.S. Nationals twice. He's been a world champion, and he won this World Finals event back in 1981. The #1 driver on the Miller American team, Gary Beck. His car owner is Larry Miner. Owning and operating his own racing operation as he does his flying service is Connie Coletta. The two drivers encased inside the protective roll cage to protect them in case of upset. Strapped in with all the fire protective gear required by NHRA. They come towards the starting line to light the 2 light bulbs at the top of the Christmas tree, indicating to the starter that they're ready. He throws the switch. It's a green light and tire smoke for Connie Coletta. Beck down to the finish line on an easy single run. Does not take it easy. 5.73 seconds at 244 miles an hour. He is off the pace of his competitors just a bit, as this now sets up our semifinals, where Gary Beck will be racing against Gene Snow. As we look again in instant replay, it's instant tire smoke for Connie Coletta, losing him the race right off the starting line. Let's go to Steve.
So Gary Beck is the next to advance to the semifinals in top fuel. A 5.73 put away Coletta. Gary?
Yeah, it's dropping cylinders a little bit. We need a little more poop, I think.
Shut it off early, or was that all it had run?
No, that was it. It was, I felt it dropping a little bit in low gear. What happened to him?
He smoked the tires and just threw in the towel.
That's good. I needed that one.
While Gary Beck heads back to the pits trying to find his elusive horsepower, there's lots of work going on in Gary Ormsby's pit area. He is racing against Frank Bradley in the semifinals. And Ormsby, the big upset winner over Don Garlits. And while Garlits may be out of competition, he is certainly not out of the fans' mind or their thoughts. As he heads down the return road, a tip of the hat, a big wave by Garlits to this huge crowd, the crowd that he gives the credit for all of his motivation for his success in 1985. Here come the funny cars. Kenny Bernstein has been practically unstoppable throughout the 1985 season. He gives a lot of credit to his crew chief and to the technological advances in the sport of funny car racing. One of those is the use of a wind tunnel to develop the aerodynamics on the fiberglass body. Another is a secret that nobody's telling what it is. It's hidden underneath this towel. There's a lot of speculation, but nobody knows. The terrible towel covers the secret of Kenny Bernstein. Whatever it is, it works. Kenny Bernstein is the Winston World Champion for 1985. This man has won that title 4 consecutive years. Don Prudhomme in the Pepsi Wendy's Special is racing in round number 2 against John Force. 1985 has been a season of peaks and valleys for Don Prudhomme. On one weekend, he will absolutely annihilate the competition. On others, he couldn't buy a win. But the Granada Hills, California racer is one to be watched regardless of what race it is. In round number 1 at the World Finals, Don Prudhomme was racing against Trip Shoemake in the In-N-Out Burger Special. And Don Prudhomme gave every indication that he has regained the performance level that he enjoyed for so many years, as he established a new national record of over 264 miles an hour in defeating Trip Shoemake. That earned him the right to race John Force from Yorba Linda, California. Force, driving the Coca-Cola Wendy's Jolly Rancher Corvette, raced against the Pontiac Trans Am, the old Milwaukee Special of Candies and Hues, with the reigning world champion Mark Oswald at the wheel. A brilliant driving job by Oswald, but just a bit more horsepower for John Force, and Force defeated the reigning world champion to come into round number 2 to race Don Prudhomme. Force in the far lane, Prudhomme in the near lane. The final check of that record-holding Pontiac by the crew is crew chief Bob Brandt. Austin Coyle, the crew chief for John Force, two of the more brilliant men in nitro-burning racing today. These sleek cars, capable, as we saw, of speeds over 264 miles an hour, will cover this quarter mile in less than 5.7 seconds or better. John Force has yet to win an NHRA national event title. Don Prudhomme, the winningest nitro-burning driver of all, and Force up in smoke, and Prudhomme, another great run, 263 miles an hour at 5.70 seconds. What a way to end the season. This is the final race of the year, and Prudhomme going with great style at 263 miles an hour against a tire-smoking John Force. When you lose that much traction, you lose the race.
Well, to set a national record at this stage of the season won't even get you a cup of coffee. But to men like Don Prudhomme, to establish yourself as the world's fastest funny car driver, you backed it up. Your 264-mile-an-hour record will go into the book.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a long time coming. We did a little aerodynamic with this Pontiac, a little work during the season, and it's a lot slicker, and it's counted for the speed, I'd say.
And a very solid 5.70 elapsed time.
Well, thanks. I didn't even know. Yeah, that's good. You know, we just want to keep the consistency up. That's the main thing.
You were the first to break 250. That meant a lot to you. Does this record mean as much?
Well, it all means a lot to me, you know, especially at this point in your career, you know, when you've done so much, come back and run real good is really a gratifying feeling.
There's 2 more rounds to go.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Steve, Don Prudhomme certainly appears to be enjoying at least this moment of the 1985 season. Back on the racetrack, our next pair of funny cars. Their escape hatch is open to let the smoke out and the fresh air in. In the near lane, it is Al Segrini. Segrini from Easton, Massachusetts, driving for car owner Joe Pisano, the developer of the JP1 racing engine. In the Coors Corvette, one of the longtime veterans, this is Tom McEwen. He dates back just about as long as does Don Prudhomme and Don Garlits and Gene Snow in this sport of championship drag racing, and regarded by many of his peers as one of the premier drivers ever to take a car down a straight line racetrack for a quarter of a mile distance. Segrini has tasted victory on this racing surface. He won the Winter Nationals earlier this year. He won the same event a year ago. So he is no novice to this sport of drag racing. The escape hatch is closed, the latches are thrown, and Segrini approaches the starting line. McEwen already there and waiting. Both cars inch forward, and it is instant tire smoke for McEwen. The car losing traction, and Segrini with an easy go. He's almost got a single run, but Segrini off the pace with a 6.11, 244 miles an hour. McEwen, I'm certain, very dejected inside that Corvette-bodied car. He pulls out wide to take the first turnoff off this quarter-mile racetrack. And it will have to be another day for Tom McEwen to win the Winston World Finals. Al Segrini, though, advances into the semifinals, while back at the starting line, the terrible towel continues to hide something. Whatever it is, they aren't telling the secrets. Kenny Bernstein, the driver, Dale Armstrong, the crew chief, and as you can see, ever so elusively, the crewman pulls the towel off just as the body goes down over Kenny Bernstein, the man that has won the Winston World Champion title this year. The Budweiser King is scheduled to race the Skoal Bandit, Tim Gross. Earlier in round number 1, Gross in the near lane was racing the Miller Warrior of Dale Puldy. That's a Buick Somerset Regal body, the fiberglass replica body that is gracing the funny car of Puldy and Mike Hamby. It was a tremendous race, very close, and at the finish line, just by a margin of inches, Tim Gross pulls out the win. But it was a very expensive win, the engine damage unable to be repaired, and the Budweiser King, Kenny Bernstein, gets a break. His competitors say Bernstein doesn't need a break, but this single will advance Bernstein into the semifinals. One of the technical advances of Bernstein and his crew that has been copied by many other racers is the onboard computer. Here's Steve.
Now, the computer only weighs about 1.5 pounds, but the stories that it can tell. It monitors 6 individual functions of the car at 40 readouts per second. Everything from engine RPM to fuel pressure, blower pressure, the position of Kenny's throttle foot, and it monitors the performance of both magnetos. This is the very first thing that Dale Armstrong, the crew chief, does, is come back, debrief this computer, take all of this database, and figure out how to set up the car for the following round. Now, Kenny is making this technology now available to everybody for a round figure of about $3,000. But what's under that dirty little towel? We'll never know.
Steve, we really hope that you might be able to find out for us. But whatever it is, it's got the competition talking, worrying, and it certainly may have or may not have an effect on the performance of the Budweiser King. Our next pair of cars doing the burnout in the near lane is the Chief Auto Parts 711 Ford Mustang of Billy Meyer. In the far lane, Ron Correnti driving the Captain Crazy Ford Thunderbird. For Billy Meyer, he's never driven anything but a funny car in professional drag racing competition. Ron Correnti, the latest driver for Bill Dunlap of Captain Crazy Racing, has got a relatively new car, this bright silver painted Ford Thunderbird, one of the first T-Birds in the funny car circuit. Billy Meyer would like to end 1985 on a stronger note than he started. He destroyed 2 cars in massive engine explosions in the very early parts of the season. That set his effort back a long ways through all of 1985. But here he is in round number 2 at the World Finals, racing against Ron Correnti. Meyer in the near lane, Correnti in the far lane, and Correnti pulls about a car length ahead. Can Meyer come back to catch him? No, but Ron Correnti smokes an engine. His car owner, Bill Dunlap, is ecstatic with the victory. That puts Correnti in the semifinals, and the Ford T-Bird defeats the Ford Mustang. Correnti over Meyer. As we watch again, no tire smoke off the starting line. Both drivers with the power and clutch combination just right. But at the finish line, he's got about a car length lead. That's Ron Correnti in the silver T-Bird. Watch as the engine starts to let go. It begins to give him problems, and then a huge cloud of smoke as he starts to cross the finish line. Ron Correnti and the crew congratulating each other, but knowing when they go back to the pit area, there's nothing but work and a lot of hard effort awaiting them. Already hard at work is Don Prudhomme and his crew as they lift that record-holding aluminum racing block out of the chassis. Some problems with it on its last run. That's the motor that went 264 miles an hour in a funny car, and it is being pulled off to the side and replaced. That means that Prudhomme will go into the semifinals with another engine between the frame rails. Will it be as good as the previous one? We'll have to wait and see. The next in our series of World Finals flashbacks takes us to Amarillo, Texas. The year 1971, the winning Top Fuel driver that year was Jerry Glenn. Speeds had increased to 227 miles an hour. The crowd's just as enthused then as they are today. There were still a lot of the front-engine Top Fuel dragsters. In fact, the bulk of the field was made up of the Top Fuel cars. There's Steve Carboni. He won the world champion title back in 1969. The story in 1971 centered around one car and one driver. That was Don Garlits, who had debuted earlier that year, the first ever successful rear-engine dragster. Today, he's the world champion. Let's go back now to the Don Prudhomme pit area and Steve Evans.
Don, you set the speed record, but may have paid the price, huh?
Yeah, it's really hard on it. You know, those 260-mile-an-hour runs, it's very hard on the bottom end, it seems like, and I made the decision to change it because you're looking for big trouble. You know, you can spit the whole bottom end out or break a crankshaft or something, and win, lose, or draw, it's best to change the motor.
While the work continues in Don Prudhomme's pit area on the starting line, Top Fuel dragsters are set for the semifinal round. Gary Ormsby will be in the far lane, while in the near lane will be Frank Bradley. Ormsby, in the previous round, had a tremendous upset and an outstanding elapsed time as he defeated Don Garlits with a 5.49-second run. He wants to try to duplicate that. Frank Bradley would like to parlay a smooth driving job off the starting line and a little bit of an improved performance level out of his Jolly Rancher Candy special to take him into the finals. We'll find out in just a few seconds who will make it as Ormsby stages last in the far lane. And is Ormsby out first? A tire-smoking run like days of old for Frank Bradley. For crew chief Lee Beard and his owner-driver Gary Ormsby, they're facing a lot of work, but they're also facing a final round appearance. As we look back again, you see Ormsby and Bradley. The Christmas tree goes green. They leave the starting line almost together, but it's instant tire smoke for Bradley. He's out of the race. Let's go to Gary Ormsby.
It didn't pull quite as hard on the top end that time.
You have to work on it between rounds.
Yeah, it looks like we'll have to do a little work.
The racetrack, is it holding up for you?
Yeah, it seemed to be. I didn't feel it get loose at all out there, and it pulled real good except for the top end.
Frank Bradley smoked the tires early on.
I thought something happened because I didn't see him out there at a ways, and I figured he either smoked the tires or shut it off.
Okay, Gary Ormsby, that's one half of the Top Fuel final.
And Steve, Gary Ormsby ran 5.56 seconds at over 251 miles an hour. And he here in the Miller American Special of Larry Minor is Gary Beck. Their massive crew had a tremendous task confronting them between rounds. They had to fix the transmission.
You're looking at Gary Beck's crewman Terry Caldwell installing the transmission in this top fuel dragster. We've said before that the driver makes one gear change. Well, this is how it is done. It's an aluminum case, and much like a Model T Ford, believe it or not, has planetary gears in it, far more stronger than the old Model T, along with a clutch pack. And the clutch pack enables the drivers to change the ratio of the transmission. 30% underdrive, 35, clear up to 60% underdrive if you'd use one in a pro stock car. Now, all he does is push a button because there are air bubbles that force the transmission to shift, and bolted to the back of the transmission, the long lever you see is the reverser.
And as Gary Beck backs into position, his competition is nowhere to be seen. Gene Snow is trying to get the engine started. The crew working diligently over it, but nothing happening. The engine trying to fire, but it's not working right. And Snow just throws up his hand and shakes his head. He says he doesn't know. Gary Beck does another burnout. That gives Snow even more time. And the crew looking it over, some helpers coming around trying to offer suggestions. But Snow looking, and that's a terrible position to be in, sitting in front of the motor. Everybody behind you working, and you can't tell what's happening. Gary Beck, though, knows that he is yet to see his competition, and the crew looking at it, trying to figure out what is the problem. They're working around the ignition system, seeing if that may be the difficulty. And while the work goes on, Gary Beck's engine continuing to run, and there will be a point where there will be no more time for Gene Snow. The crew now appearing to take the magneto apart. But for Gary Beck, he is into the staging beams, and Gene Snow out of competition, the engine unable to fire. Now, Gary Beck has got to take a shot at the elapsed time of 5.56 seconds if he wants lane choice. He streaks through the quarter mile. His elapsed time, 5.55 seconds. By 100th of a second, he gets lane choice, and Gene Snow out of his car, taking off his protective uniform. And there has got to be disappointment in that man's heart. He had run 5:49 earlier today for the quickest elapsed time of his career. That sets up our finals in Top Fuel. It is Gary Ormsby against Gary Beck. The next in our series of historical flashbacks on this Winston World Finals takes us to Ontario, California, and the famed Ontario Motor Speedway. From 1974 to 1980, OMS played host to the Winston World Finals, and if there was a finer racing facility built anywhere in the world, we have yet to see it. OMS was host to many all-time firsts, the first ever Top Fuel World Champion crown won by a woman driver, Shirley Muldowney. It also saw the many-time champion Don Prudhomme continue his string of victories. Ontario Motor Speedway, like Dallas International and so many others, is gone today, but will never be forgotten. Back here at Pomona, California, this is the World Finals, and Gene Snow had some problems.
Well, Gene Snow, after all the smiles from the 5:49 in the second round, then you sat bolted into the cockpit, totally frustrated.
Well, we had the magneto in wrong and no way it could ever start, and that certainly is frustrating. We hadn't even hurt the motor on the run before the 5:49.
Well, you're not the first crew to ever put it in 180 degrees out. That's happened to a lot of racers.
Yeah, it happens. We discussed it. I said, after we leaked the motor and it leaked good, I said, we got two choices. We can take it apart and be sure it's right, but also at the same time take a chance of doing something wrong when we put it back together. Or we can go ahead and run it and maybe have missed something. So we elected to take it apart, and gosh, it's just one of those things that happen.
A tough break for Gene Snow, but we'll see him again, that's for sure, as that 5.49 second elapsed time shows he's got the performance level to race with the best. Here's another man that can. This is Al Segrini driving for Joe Pisano, but he is up against the best this season. Kenny Bernstein and a Budweiser King. His crew chief, Dale Armstrong. This is the man that Kenny gives all the credit to. He says, without the genius of Armstrong, he'd just be another funny car racer. But Armstrong and Bernstein have made an unbeatable combination throughout 1985 that has carried him to the Winston World Champion title. Joe Pisano developed a new racing engine. He debuted it earlier this season on this same racetrack, and Al Segrini, his driver, won the first race ever for that power plant, but it is not to be on this round as Kenny Bernstein and the Bud King move into the finals. 5.62 seconds. His speed, 257 miles an hour. Dominance in racing and Kenny Bernstein. Those two phrases have been synonymous throughout this entire 1985 season. Back at the starting line, the engine is running in the Wendy's Pepsi car of Don Prudhomme. The Pontiac Trans Am body coming down over the supercharger and fuel injector as Prudhomme pulls away from beside his support vehicle into the water burnout area. He is scheduled to race Ron Corretti, but there's no one there. Corretti is back in the pit area with problems. We saw in the previous round where Corretti beat Billy Meyer, but on the run there was a lot of smoke come out of the engine as he crossed the finish line in the Ford Thunderbird of Bill Dunlap. For Ron Corretti, his racing day is over. Let's go back to the pits and Steve Evans.
That little bit of black on the otherwise shiny crankshaft journal in Ron Corretti's motor is the reason he's not right now on the starting line to race Don Prudhomme. That's enough to cause you not to run this motor.
Oh, yeah. It got a little lean last run, right down to the lights. I felt it lay over, and that's one of the hazards of the business, you know. We expect that every once in a while, and it just happened at that time.
And you didn't find that black on the crank in time to change?
No, it was in fact, it was the last rod that came out. I couldn't believe it. We pulled all the rods out, and everything looked fine until we got to that one, and then consequently we had to change motors and we ran out of time.
Well, I know Don Prudhomme doesn't miss you up there, but we do.
Yeah, thank you very much.
A big disappointment for driver Ron Corretti and his car owner Bill Dunlap as they made it to the semifinals but unable to answer the call. Don Prudhomme gets the single. Is he going to take a shot at the 562 of Bernstein? No, he does not. Prudhomme with a 583, 213 miles an hour, gives away lane choice to Bernstein, but for the first time in quite some time, Don Prudhomme in the finals against the Bud King, Kenny Bernstein. Here's Pro Stock Eliminator. In the near lane, it is Bruce Allen driving the Rare and Morrison Camaro out of Arlington, Texas, against Ken Dondero driving for his car owner, Bob Piniella. The Pontiac Firebird of Dondero has got his work cut out for him as racing against the Rare and Morrison Camaro, the leading proponents of Chevrolet, with Bruce Allen at the wheel. Allen took over the driving chores for the late Lee Shepard earlier this season after Shepard was fatally injured in a testing accident. The semifinals of Pro Stock find the Firebird in the far lane, the Camaro in the near lane. Both cars very evenly matched. 500 cubic inches, two 4-barrel carburetors, racing gasoline for fuel, 2,350 pounds weight, including the driver. And these are the ultimate in the factory type of race car. And a tremendous start for Bruce Allen as he pulls away from Ken Dondero. And at the finish line, Bruce Allen at a 7.65 second elapsed time, his speed over 181 miles an hour. He was 0.07 of a second quicker off the starting line than Dondero. A tremendous hole shot for Bruce Allen. The final pair in this semifinal round find the Camaro of Joe Lapone working with his crew chief, Bill Grumpy Jenkins. A former champion himself out of Newton Square, Pennsylvania, comes Lapone to race the winningest driver ever in NHRA history from Whiteland, Indiana, Bob Glidden in the Chief Auto Parts 711 Ford Thunderbird. Glidden has won more NHRA national events than any other driver in competition, regardless of class. And he has done the bulk of his winning in Pro Stock, one of the most difficult fields of competition in any form of motorsport. It's the Ford Thunderbird in the far lane, the Chevrolet Camaro in the near lane, and the crowd just loves these factory battles between these hot rods. Joe Lapone, Bob Glidden matching up, earn the right to go into the finals. And taking their time before the starting light comes on. Glidden finally into the staging beams. And it's a good start for Lapone. Side by side, they go down the racetrack. And it is oh so close. Joe Lapone is declared the winner. And Lapone defeats Bob Glidden to advance into the finals, so it'll be two Chevrolets. Joe Lapone Jr. with his crew chief Bill Jenkins turning the wrenches against Bruce Allen at the wheel of the Rare and Morrison Camaro out of Hendrick Motorsport. As we watch again, look at the wheels up start on this Chevy and the Ford. They both lift the front wheels high off of the asphalt. They head down track, and at the finish line, it is an extremely close race. At this point, Joe Lapone has got the advantage. But as we see in our stop action, they are crossing the finish line side by side. NHRA ruled that Joe Lapone Jr. won the race, and he moves into the finals. The huge crowd is buzzing with excitement as our finalists are set in all three of the professional categories of championship drag racing. But before we get to the action, let's take our final look back at the World Finals in history. 1981 through 1984, Orange County International Raceway was the home of the Winston World Finals. It also saw many firsts. It saw the quickest elapsed time ever, the record-holding 5.39-second elapsed time by Gary Beck. Orange County International Raceway also saw Shirley Muldowney win her third Winston World Champion title. But Orange County International Raceway fell victim to progress. It, like Dallas International Motor Speedway, Ontario Motor Speedway, and many others, are gone today, thus necessitating the move of the Winston World Finals to the Los Angeles County Fairgrounds in Pomona, California. And that's where we are right now for the finals in Pro Stock Eliminator. This is Bruce Allen. He has won 3 times already this season, his first ever year in pro stock racing. He is a former modified racer that moved into the cockpit earlier this season. For Joe Lapone Jr., he was runner-up at the Fall Nationals just a couple of weeks ago, but he has yet to win his first ever pro stock title in NHRA competition. Joe Lapone teaming up with engine builder Bill Grumpy Jenkins, a great name in Chevrolet racing in his own right, racing against the current leaders of the pack in Chevrolet Performance, the Rare and Morrison team from Arlington, Texas. The 2 Camaros as evenly matched as one could ask for. The drivers now concentrating on their starting technique. They come into the staging beams as easily as possible, and it's a red light start for Bruce Allen. He anticipated just a little too soon and left the red light, the disqualification for Allen, and Joe Lapone Jr. has won his first ever NHRA national title, the Winston World Finals for 1985. And what a victory it is for Joe Lapone. As we watch again, you see leaving just a hair too soon, and the big red eye glowing for Bruce Allen. A tough break for him.
Did you know he red lighted?
Yeah, I saw it. Hate to win like that, but I guess we'll take him any way we can.
Absolutely. The car performed flawlessly, and it's great to see you and Grump back together again.
Thank you very much.
Joe Lapone Jr., your World Finals champion this season. Here's the final in Funny Car. 2 of the greatest names ever in drag racing history. The Budweiser King, Kenny Bernstein in the far lane. Don Prudhomme in the near lane driving the Pepsi Wendy's Special, the Pontiac Trans Am body against the Ford Tempo. 2,500 horsepower plus, those engines burning the nitromethane fuel as they patiently wait the final staging moves by each driver. They've got to be thinking, how can I pull out this win? And Prudhomme drifts close to the center line. He goes across the center line. That means disqualification, and Bernstein has won another race. The crew overjoyed with the victory. What a way to cap a season, the World Championship, and now the World Finals title. Kenny Bernstein wins it at 5.61 seconds. The most consistent performance that we have ever seen in a funny car all season long has been Kenny Bernstein and this Budweiser King Ford Tempo. Down the racetrack, Prudhomme starts to get into some severe tire vibrations. The car shaking violently. It moves across the center line. That would have disqualified him, but Bernstein just blasts ahead and moves across the finish line first.
My hat's off to Snake. He ran a super race, and all our competitors all year long. It's a way to cap the season. Dale Armstrong, the crew, great.
I know it was a special treat for us and the fans to see you and Prudhomme together. How about you?
Oh, it was great. Sure, Snake's a really good friend, and a long time ago, and still is probably one of my idols from time to time. And I looked at it. It was a good race, you bet.
It looked like he struck first off the starting line.
He could have. He maybe got a taste, but I don't care. Who gets to the other end, that's what happens. Armstrong power pulled us through.
Did you see him go over the center line?
I saw him right next to me, and I knew he was close to it. And I figured that if that, as close as he was to me, I knew he probably had to be over. But it didn't matter. The Budweiser King Motorcraft Tempo was on the wood.
Amen to that.
A very happy Kenny Bernstein. Not only does he win the race, but he also wins the war. That world champion title, he had it locked up before he ever turned a tire here at Pomona, California. The final race of the day. This is Gary Ormsby. You talk about consistent performances. He has had it throughout the Top Fuel competition as Ormsby comes into this final to race against Gary Beck. In round number 1, Ormsby had a 5.45 second elapsed time. In round 2, a 5.49. In the semifinals, Ormsby fell off to a 5.56. That opened the door just a crack, enough to let Gary Beck come in with a 5.55 and pick up lane choice. Beck in the Miller American car takes the lane furthest from the camera. In the near lane is Ormsby. Based on performance, you have to say Ormsby is the favorite, but the lane choice here may make a difference. We saw just a few moments earlier as Don Prudhomme got into the shakes, the car drifted across the center line. That disqualified him. He still ran a 5.77, driving through the vibration, still trying to prove to the Budweiser King and Kenny Bernstein that he is most competitive. For Ormsby, though, he's got to be thinking about that. His crew chief, Lee Beard, one of the best in the business, as is the crew chief for Gary Beck, Bernie Federley. Two magnificent minds, two great drivers, and two outstanding machines, all matched here in the finals of this Winston World Finals for 1985. The burnout's just about finished. You can tell it's starting to get dark. You can begin to see the header flames. The darker it gets, the brighter and taller they seem to stand off the headers. For Ormsby, a final check of all the equipment as there's over 2,500 horsepower flashing away there. Across from him, the same for Gary Beck and his crew. All the effort by the crew is over at this moment, though. For the drivers, the sole responsibility is theirs. And it's a great start. Beck out front by about a half a car length at this point. Can Ormsby come from behind? It is very close, and an engine explosion for Ormsby. The parts go flying, and Ormsby's engine, the supercharger, laid off to one side. A huge ball of flame. Gary Beck won the race, and Gary Ormsby lost the war. Well, I'll tell you, that is one classic way to finish a drag race. As Gary Beck pulls ahead at the starting line, he holds on to that lead throughout. But Gary Ormsby did not give up. He stretched that engine to the limit. In fact, he stretched it so far that it exploded just as he crossed the finish line. There's the first flash of flame, and it explodes into a huge ball. There you can see the engine lets go, the parts going high in the air and bouncing off the pavement. Gary Beck, the winner, is ahead of him, but a disappointment for Gary Ormsby.
Well, I was, believe me, real happy, real pleased for Larry Minor. It's been a long, hard season over here. Tremendous gang of people, Bernie Federley, Ed McCullough, Bill Walter, that worked so hard. The people on my car and Larry's car and Ace's car. Tremendous season, really, to try to finish up with a win.
And what a way to win it. Just a wheel-to-wheel duel.
It was a good drag race. We knew it was going to be.
Well, they didn't skunk you this season, Mr. Beck.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's nice to be here.
Gary Beck with a smile on his face as the Miller American car of Larry Minor goes into the winner's circle, the Top Fuel champion at this World Finals for 1985. What a way to end the season, as Gary says. It's been a tough year. He's had his share of problems. For Larry Minor, he has got 4 distinctly different race cars. He's got 2 Top Fuel dragsters, a funny car, and an off-road racer. And what a way to go. For Kenny Bernstein, the world champion title is his, and also some congratulatory kisses. He is a happy man indeed. We hope you've enjoyed the World Finals with Steve Evans. I'm Dave McClellan. This has been a presentation of Diamond P Sports.